Part 1. One morning in a flat in one of the great buildings in Gorokliovaya Street, the population of which was sufficient to constitute that of a provincial town, there was lying in bed a gentleman named Ilya Ilyich Oblomov. He was a fellow of a little over 30, of medium height and of pleasant exterior. Unfortunately, in his dark gray eyes there was an absence of any definite idea, and in his other features a total lack of concentration. Suddenly a thought would wander across his face with the freedom of a bird, flutter for a moment in his eyes, settle on his half-opened lips, and remain momentarily lurking in the lines of his forehead. Then it would disappear, and once more his face would glow with a radiant insouciance which extended even to his attitude and the folds of his night-robe. At other times his glance would darken as with weariness or ennui, yet neither the one nor the other expression could altogether banish from his countenance that gentleness which was the ruling, the fundamental characteristic not only of his features but also of the spirit which lay beneath them. That spirit shone in his eyes, in his smile, and in his every movement of hand and head. On glancing casually at Oblomov, a superficially observant person would have said, "Evidently he is good-natured, but a simpleton," whereas a person of greater penetration and sympathy than the first would have prolonged his glance, and then gone on his way thoughtfully, and with a smile as though he were pleased with something. Hua! One of the principal streets of Petrograd. Oblomov's face was neither ruddy, nor dull, nor pale, but of an indefinite hue. At all events, that was the impression which it gave, possibly because through insufficiency of exercise, or through want of fresh air, or through a lack of both, he was wrinkled beyond his years. In general, to judge from the extreme whiteness of his bare neck, his small puffy hands, and his soft shoulders, one would conclude that he possessed an effeminate body. Even when excited, his actions were governed by an unvarying gentleness, added to a lassitude that was not devoid of a certain peculiar grace. On the other hand, should depression of spirits show itself in his face, his glance would grow dull and his brow furrowed as doubt, despondency, and apprehension fell to contending with one another. Yet this crisis of emotion seldom crystallized into the form of a definite idea, still less into that of a fixed resolve. Almost always such emotion evaporated in a sigh and shaded off into a sort of apathetic lethargy. Oblomov's indoor costume corresponded exactly with the quiet outlines of his face and the effeminacy of his form. The costume in question consisted of a dressing gown of some Persian material, a real Eastern dressing gown, a garment that was devoid both of tassels and velvet facings, and a waist, yet so roomy that Oblomov might have wrapped himself in it once or twice over. Also, in accordance with the immutable custom of Asia, its sleeves widened steadily from knuckles to shoulder. True, it was a dressing gown which had lost its pristine freshness and had, in places, exchanged its natural, original sheen for one acquired by hardware, yet still it retained both the clarity of its oriental coloring and the soundness of its texture. In Oblomov's eyes, it was a garment possessed of a myriad invaluable qualities, for it was so soft and pliable that, when wearing it, the body was unaware of its presence, and, like an obedient slave, it answered even to the slightest movement. Neither waistcoat nor cravat did Oblomov wear when indoors, since he loved freedom and space. For the same reason his slippers were long, soft, and broad, to the end that, whenever he lowered his legs from the bed to the floor without looking at what he was doing, his feet might fit into the slippers at once. With Oblomov, lying in bed was neither a necessity, as in the case of an invalid or of a man who stands badly in need of sleep, nor an accident, as in the case of a man who is feeling worn out, nor a gratification, as in the case of a man who is purely lazy. Rather, it represented his normal condition, whenever he was at home. And almost always he was at home, he would spend his time in lying on his back. Likewise, he used but the one room which was combined to serve both as bedroom, as study, and as reception room, in which we have just discovered him. True, 2 other rooms lay at his disposal, but seldom did he look into them save on mornings, which did not comprise by any means every morning, when his old valet happened to be sweeping out the study. The furniture in them stood perennially covered over, and never were the blinds drawn up. At first sight, the room in which Oblomov was lying was a well-fitted one. In it there stood a writing table of redwood, a couple of sofas upholstered in some silken material, and a handsome screen that was embroidered with birds and fruits unknown to nature. Also, the room contained silken curtains, a few mats, some pictures, bronzes, and pieces of china, and a multitude of other pretty trifles. Yet even the most cursory glance from the experienced eye of a man of taste would have detected no more than a tendency to observe les convenances while escaping their actual observance. Without doubt, that was all that Oblomov had thought of when furnishing his study. Taste of a really refined nature would never have remained satisfied with such ponderous, ungainly redwood chairs with such rickety whatnots. Moreover, the back of one of the sofas had sagged, and here and there the wood had come away from the glue. Much the same thing was to be seen in the case of the pictures, the vases, and certain other trifles of the apartment. Nevertheless, its master was accustomed to regard its appurtenances with the cold, detached eye of one who would ask, "Who has dared to bring this stuff here?" The same indifference on his part, added to, perhaps, an even greater indifference on the part of his servant, Zachar, caused the study, when contemplated with attention, to strike the beholder with an impression of all-prevailing carelessness and neglect. On the walls and around the pictures there hung cobwebs coated with dust. The mirrors, instead of reflecting, would more usefully have served as tablets for recording memoranda. Every mat was freely spotted with stains. On the sofa there lay a forgotten towel, and on the table, as on most mornings, a plate, a salt cellar, a half-eaten crust of bread, and some scattered crumbs, all of which had failed to be cleared away after last night's supper. Indeed, were it not for the plate, for a recently smoked pipe that was propped against the bed, and for the recumbent form of Oblomov himself, one might have imagined that the place contained not a single living soul, so dusty and discolored did everything look, and so lacking were any active traces of the presence of a human being. True, on the whatnot there were 2 or 3 open books, while a newspaper was tossing about, and the bureau bore on its top an inkstand and a few pens, but the pages at which the books were lying open were covered with dust and beginning to turn yellow, thus proving that they had long been tossed aside. The date of the newspaper belonged to the previous year, and from the inkstand, whenever a pen happened to be dipped therein, there arose, with a frightened buzz, only a derelict fly. On this particular morning, Oblomov had, contrary to his usual custom, awakened at the early hour of 8. Somehow he looked perturbed. Anxiety, regret, and vexation kept chasing one another across his features. Evidently he had fallen a prey to some inward struggle, and had not yet been able to summon his wits to the rescue. The fact of the matter was that, overnight, he had received from the starosta of his country estate an exceedingly unpleasant letter. We all know what disagreeable things a starosta can say in his letters, how he can tell of bad harvests, of arrears of debt, of diminished incomes, and so forth. And though this particular official had been inditing precisely similar epistles during the past 3 years, his latest communication had affected its recipient as powerfully as though Oblomov had received an unlooked-for blow. Yet, to do Oblomov justice, he had always bestowed a certain care upon his affairs. Indeed, no sooner had he received the starosta's first disturbing letter, he had done so 3 years ago, than he had set about devising a plan for changing and improving the administration of his property. Yet to this day the plan in question remained not fully thought out, although long ago he had recognized the necessity of doing something actually decisive, overseer or steward. Consequently, on awakening, he resolved to rise, to perform his ablutions and his tea consumed, to consider matters, to jot down a few notes, and, in general, to tackle the affair properly. Yet for another half-hour he lay prone under the torture of this resolve, until eventually he decided that such tackling could best be done after tea, and that, as usual, he would drink that tea in bed. The more so since a recumbent position could not prove a hindrance to thought. Therefore he did as he had decided, and when the tea had been consumed, he raised himself upon his elbow and arrived within an ace of getting out of bed. In fact, glancing at his slippers, he even began to extend a foot in their direction, but presently withdrew it. 10:30 struck, and Oblomov gave himself a shake. "What is the matter?" he said vexedly. "In all conscience 'tis time that I were doing something. Would I could make up my mind to... He broke off with a shout of "Zakhar," whereupon there entered an elderly man in a grey suit and brass buttons, a man who sported beneath a perfectly bald pate a pair of long, bushy, grizzled whiskers that would have sufficed to fit out 3 ordinary men with beards. His clothes, it is true, were cut according to a country pattern, but he cherished them as a faint reminder of his former livery, as the one surviving token of the dignity of the house of Oblomov. The house of Oblomov was one which had once been wealthy and distinguished, but which, of late years, had undergone impoverishment and diminution, until finally it had become lost among a crowd of noble houses of more recent creation. For a few moments Oblomov remained too plunged in thought to notice Zakhar's presence, but at length the valet coughed. "What do you want?" Oblomov inquired. "You called me just now, Baron." "Master or sir? I called you, you say. Well, I cannot remember why I did so." "Return to your room until I have remembered." Zakhar retired, and Oblomov spent another quarter of an hour in thinking over the accursed letter. "I have lain here long enough," at last he said to himself. "Really, I must rise. But suppose I were to read the letter through carefully, and then to rise. Zakhar!" Zakhar re-entered, and Oblomov straightway sank into a reverie. For a minute or two the valet stood eyeing his master with covert resentment. Then he moved towards the door. "Why are you going away?" Oblomov asked suddenly. "Because, Baron, you have nothing to say to me. Why should I stand here for nothing?" "What? Have your legs become so shrunken that you cannot stand for a moment or two?" "I am worried about something, so you must wait. You have just been lying down in your room, haven't you?" "Please search for the letter which arrived from the Starosta last night. What have you done with it? What letter?" "I have seen no letter," asserted Zakhar. "But you took it from the postman yourself." "Maybe I did, but how am I to know where you have since placed it?" The valet fussed about among the papers and other things on the table. "You never know anything," remarked his master. "Look in that basket there. Or possibly the letter has fallen behind the sofa. By the way, the back of that sofa has not yet been mended. Tell the joiner to come at once. It was you that broke the thing, yet you never give it a thought." "I did not break it," retorted Zakhar. "It broke of itself. It couldn't have lasted forever. It was bound to crack some day." This was a point which Oblomov did not care to contest. "Have you found the letter yet?" he asked. "Yes, several letters. But they are not what I want." "I can see no others," asserted Zakhar. "Very well," was Oblomov's impatient reply. "I will get up and search for the letter myself." Zakhar retired to his room again, but had scarcely rested his hands against his pallet before stretching himself out, when once more there came a peremptory shout of "Zakhar!" "Zakhar! Good Lord!" grumbled the valet as a third time he made for the study. "Why should I be tormented in this fashion? I would rather be dead." My handkerchief, cried Oblomov. Yes, and very quickly, too. You might have guessed that that is what I am wanting. Zakhar displayed no particular surprise or offense at this reproachful command. Probably he thought both the command and the reproach natural. Who knows where the handkerchief is? He muttered, as he made a tour of the room and felt each chair, although he could not but have perceived that on them there was nothing whatsoever lying. You lose everything, he added, opening the door into the parlor in order to see whether the handkerchief might not be lurking there. Where are you going? Exclaimed Oblomov. 'Tis here you must search. I have not been into those other rooms since the year before last. Be quick, will you? I see no handkerchief, said Zakhar, spreading out his hands and peering into every corner. There it is, suddenly he croaked. 'Tis just underneath you. I can see its end sticking out. You have been lying on it all the time, yet you actually asked me to find it. He hobbled away without waiting for an answer. For a moment or two, Oblomov was taken aback, but soon found another means of putting his valet in the wrong. A nice way to do your cleaning, he said. What a lot of dust and dirt, to be sure. Look at those corners. You never bestir yourself at all. If I never bestir myself, retorted Zakhar offendedly, at least I do my best and don't spare myself, for I dust and sweep almost every day. Everything looks clean and bright enough for a wedding. What a lie, cried Oblomov. Be off to your room again. That he had provoked Zakhar to engage in this conversation was a fact which gave him small pleasure. The truth was, he had forgotten that, once a delicate subject is touched upon, one cannot well avoid a fuss. Though he wished his rooms to be kept clean, he wished this task to be carried out invisibly, and apart from himself, whereas whenever Zakhar was called upon to do even the least sweeping or dusting, he made a grievance of it. After Zakhar had retired to his den, Oblomov relapsed into thought until, a few minutes later, the clock sounded a half-hour of some sort. "What is that?" cried Oblomov in horror. "Soon the time will be 11, yet I am not yet up and washed. Zakhar, Zakhar!" Zakhar reappeared. "Are my washing things ready?" his master inquired. "Yes, they have been ready a long time. Why do you not get up? And why didn't you tell me that the things are ready? Had you done that, I should have risen long ago. Go along, and I will follow you, but at the moment I must sit down and write a letter." Zakhar left the room. Presently he reappeared with a much bescribbled, greasy account book and a bundle of papers. "If you are going to write anything," he said, "perhaps you would like to check these accounts at the same time. Some money is due to be paid out." "What accounts?" "What money?" inquired Oblomov petulantly. "The accounts sent in by the butcher, the greengrocer, the laundress, and the baker. All are wanting their money." "Always money and worry," grumbled Oblomov. "Why do you not give me the accounts at intervals instead of in a batch like this?" "Because each time you have sent me away and then put matters off until the morrow. Well, these accounts can wait until the morrow." "No, they cannot, for the creditors are pressing, and say they are going to allow you nothing more on credit. Today is the 1st of the month, you must remember." "Ah, fresh cares, fresh worries," cried Oblomov gloomily. "Why are you standing there? Lay the table and I will rise, wash, and look into the whole business." "Is the water yet ready?" "Quite." Oblomov raised himself and grunted as though he really intended to get out of bed. "By the way," said Zakhar, "whilst you were still asleep, the manager of the building sent the dvornik to say that soon you must quit the flat, since he wants it for someone else." Very well, then. We must go. Why worry me about it? This is the third time you have done so. But they keep worrying me about it. Then tell them that we intend to go. Zucker departed again, and Oblomov resumed his reverie. How long he would have remained in this state of indecision it is impossible to say, had not a ring at the doorbell resounded through the hall. "Someone has called, yet I am not yet up," exclaimed Oblomov as he slipped into his dressing gown. "Who can it be?" Lying down again, he gazed furiously towards the door. There entered a young fellow of about 25, beaming with health and irreproachably dressed to a degree which dazzled the eye with its immaculateness of linen and gorgeousness of jewelry. He was a figure calculated to excite envy. "Good morning, Volkov," cried Oblomov. "And good morning to you," returned the radiant gentleman, approaching the bed and looking about him for a spot whereon to deposit a hat. However, perceiving only dust, he retained his headgear in his hand. Next, he drew aside the skirts of his coat, preparatory to sitting down. But a hasty inspection of the nearest chair convinced him that he had far better remain standing. "So you are not yet up," he went on. "And why on earth are you wearing a nightshirt? They have quite gone out of fashion." "'Tis not a nightshirt, it is a dressing gown," said Oblomov, nestling lovingly into the ample folds of the garment. "Where are you from?" "From the tailor's." "Do you think this frock-coat a nice one?" And he turned himself round and round for Oblomov's inspection. "Splendid! Made with excellent taste," was the verdict. "Only why is it so broad behind?" "The better to ride in it. It is a riding coat. I ordered it for today for the reason that this is the 1st of May, and I am to go to the Ekaterinhof with Gorunoff. He has just got his promotion, and we intend to cut a dash on the strength of it. He has a roan horse. All the horses in his regiment are roans, and I a black." "How are you going, in a carriage or on foot?" "By neither method," replied Oblomov. "What? Today is the 1st of May, and you are not going to the Ekaterinhof?" "Why, everyone will be there." "Not quite everyone," Oblomov lazily remarked. "You must go, though. Sofia Nikolaevna and Lydia will be occupying 2 of the seats in our carriage, but the seat facing them will be vacant. Come with us, I tell you." "No, I do not intend to occupy the vacant seat." "What sort of a figure should I cut on it? Then, if you like, Mr. Gorunoff shall lend you a horse." "Of what is the fellow thinking?" said Oblomov, as though to himself. "How come you and the Gorunoff family to be so friendly with one another? Give me your word of honor not to repeat what I may tell you, and I will explain. Herewith I give it." "Very well. I'm in love with Lydia." "Splendid! Have you been in love with her long? She seems a charming girl." "I have been in love with her for 3 weeks," said Volkov with a sigh. "And Mischa, for his part, is in love with Dashenka." "Who is Dashenka?" "What, you do not know Dashenka? Why, the whole town is raving over her dancing. Tonight I am going to the opera with Mischa, and he is to throw her a bouquet. Well, I must be off to buy the necessary camellias for it. Come back then, and take lunch with me. I should like to have a talk with you, for I have just experienced 2 misfortunes. Impossible, I fear, for I am lunching with Prince Tiomenev. All the Gorunova, yes, and Lydia, too, are to be there. What a cheerful house it is, and so is Tiomenev's country place. I have heard that it is to be the scene of numberless dances and tableaux this summer. Are you likely to be one of the guests?" "No, I think not." "What hospitality the prince dispenses! This winter his guests averaged 50, and sometimes 100. How wearisome the whole thing must have been." "What? Wearisome? Why, the more the merrier. Lydia, too, used to be there, though in those days I never so much as noticed her. In fact, never once did I do so until one day I found myself vainly trying to forget her, vainly pitting reason in the lists with love." Volkov hummed the concluding words and seated himself carelessly upon a chair. Almost instantly he leaped to his feet again and blushed the dust from his trousers. "What quantities of dirt you keep everywhere," he remarked. "'Tis Zakhar's fault, not mine," replied Oblomov. "Well, now I must be off, as it is absolutely necessary that I should buy those camellias for Mischa's bouquet. Au revoir. Come and have tea after the opera and tell me all about it. No, that is impossible, for I am promised to supper at the Musinskis. It is their reception day, you know. However, meet me there and I'll present you." "What is toward at the Musinskis? What, indeed? Why, entertainment in a house where you hear all the news." "Like everything else, it would bore me." "Then go and call upon the Mezdrovs, where the talk centers upon one topic, and one topic alone, the arts. Of nothing else will you hear but the Venetian school. Beethoven, Bach, Leonardo da Vinci, and so forth." "All of them boring subjects," said Oblomov with a yawn. "What a lot of pedants the Mezdrovs must be. Do you never get tired of running about from house to house?" "Tired? Why should I? Every morning I like to go out and learn the news, thank God. My official duties never require my actual presence, save twice a week, when they consist of lunching with and doing the civil to the general. After that I proceed to call upon any people upon whom I have not called for a long while. Next there will be some new actress, whether at the Russian theater or at the French. Besides, always there is the opera, to which I am a subscriber. Furthermore, I am in love, and Mischa is about to enjoy a month's leave from his regiment, and the summer is on the point of beginning, and Mischa and I intend to retire to his country house for a change of air. We shall have plenty of sport there, since he possesses excellent neighbors, and they give bal champêtre. Also, I shall be able to escort Lydia for walks through the woods, and to row her about in a boat, and to pluck flowers for her benefit. At the present moment I must leave you. Goodbye." In this case the term general denotes a civil grade corresponding to the military rank of the same title. Rising, he endeavored to look at himself in a dust-coated mirror, after which he departed, though returning once more to show his friend the newest thing in Parisian gloves and an Easter card which Prince Tiumenev had recently sent him. "What a life," thought Oblomov with a shrug of his shoulders. "What good can a man get out of it? It is merely a squandering and a wasting of his all. Of course, an occasional look into a theater is not a bad thing, nor is being in love, for Lydia is a delightful girl, and pursuits like plucking flowers with her and rowing her about in a boat even I should enjoy, but to have to be in 10 different places every day, as Volkov has, what?" He turned over on his back and congratulated himself that he at least cherished no vain social aspirations. 'Twas better to lie where he was, and to preserve both his nerves and his human dignity. Another ring at the doorbell interrupted his reflections. This time the visitor turned out to be a gentleman in a dark frock-coat with crested buttons whose most prominent features were a clean-shaven chin, a pair of black whiskers around a haggard, but quiet and sensible face, and a thoughtful smile. "Good day, Sudbinsky," cried Oblomov cheerfully. "Good day to you," replied the gentleman. "'Tis a long time since I last saw you, but you know what this devilish civil service means. Look at that bagful of reports which I have brought with me. And not only that, but I have had to leave word at the office that a messenger will find me here should I be wanted. Never do I get a single moment to myself." "So you were on the way to your office? How come you to be going so late? Your usual hour used to be 9. "Yes, it used to be 9, but now I go at 12. "Ah, I see. You have recently been made the head of a department."
"Since when?"
"Since Easter," replied Sudbinsky with a meaning nod. "But what a lot of work! It is terrible. From 8 to 12 in the morning I am slaving at home, from 12 to 5 at the chancellery, and all the evening at home again. I have quite lost touch with my acquaintances. Come and lunch with me today, and we will drink to your promotion, said Oblomov. No, today I am lunching with the vice-director, as well as have a report to prepare by Thursday. You see, one cannot rely upon provincial advices, but must verify every return personally. Are you going to the Ekaterinhof today? No, for I am not very well, replied Oblomov, knitting his brows. Moreover, like yourself, I have some work to do. I am very sorry, said Sabinsky, for it is a fine day, and the only day on which I myself can hope for a little rest. And what news have you? Asked Oblomov. Oh, a good deal of a sort. We are required no longer to write at the end of our official letters, your humble servant, but merely accept the assurance of my profound respect. Also, we have been told that we are to cease to make out formal documents in duplicate. Likewise, our office has just been allotted 3 new tables and a couple of confidential clerks. Lastly, the commission has now concluded its sittings. There's a budget of news for you. And what of our old comrades? Nothing at present, except that Svinkin has lost his case. And to think that you work from 8 to 12, and from 12 to 5, and again in the evening. Dear, dear. Well, what should I do if I were not in the service? Asked Sabinsky. You would just read and write on your own account. But it is not given to everyone to be a litterateur. For example, you yourself write nothing. No, for I have some property on my hands, said Oblomov with a sigh. But I am working out a new system for it. I am going to introduce reforms of various kinds. The affair worries me terribly. Well, for my part, I must work in order to make a little money. Besides, I am to be married this coming autumn. Indeed. And to whom? To Mademoiselle Murashina. Do you remember their country villa next to mine? I think you came to tea with me and met her there. No, I have no recollection of it. Is she pretty? Yes, charming. Suppose one day we go to lunch with her? Oblomov hesitated. Very well, he said after a pause. Only. What about next week? Certainly. Next week let it be. But at the moment I have no suitable clothes. Is your fiancée a financial catch? Yes, for her father is a state councillor, and intends to give her 10,000 rubles, as well as to let us have half his official house, a house of 12 rooms, the whole being furnished, heated, and lighted at the public expense. So we ought to do very well. Herewith I invite you to be my best man at the wedding. Once more the doorbell rang. Goodbye, said Sabinsky. I am annoyed that, as I surmise, I should be wanted at the office. Then stay where you are, urged Oblomov. I desire your advice, for 2 misfortunes have just befallen me. No, I had better come and see you another day. And Sabinsky took his leave. Plunged up to the ears in work, good friend, thought Oblomov as he watched him depart. Yes, and blind and deaf and dumb to everything else in the world. Yet by going into society and at the same time busying yourself about your affairs, you will yet win distinction and promotion. Such is what they call a career. Yet of how little use is a man like that? His intellect, his will, his feelings, what do they avail him? So many luxuries is what they are, nothing more. Such an individual lives out his little span without achieving a single thing worth mentioning, and meanwhile he works in an office from morning till night. Yes, from morning till night, poor wretch. Certainly a modicum of quiet satisfaction was to be derived from the thought that from 9 o'clock until 3, and from 8 o'clock until 9 on the following day, he, Oblomov, could remain lying prone on a sofa instead of having to trot about with reports and to inscribe multitudes of documents. Yes, he preferred, rather, leisure for the indulgence of his feelings and imagination. Plunged in a philosophical reverie, he overlooked the fact that by his bedside there was standing a man whose lean, dark face was almost covered with a pair of whiskers, a mustache, and an imperial. Also, the newcomer's dress was studied in its negligence. "Good morning, Oblomov," he said. "Good morning, Penkin," was the response. "I should like to show you a letter which I have just received from my starosta. Whence have you sprung?" "From the newsagents nearby. I went to see if the papers are yet out." "Have you read my latest article?" "No." "Then you ought to do so." "What is it about?" Oblomov asked with a faint yawn. "About trade, about the emancipation of women, about the beautiful April days with which we have been favored, and about the newly formed fire brigade. How come you not to have read that article? In it you will see portrayed the whole of our daily life. Over and above anything else, you will read therein an argument in favor of the present realistic tendency in literature." "And have you no other work on hand?" inquired Oblomov. "Yes, a good deal. I write 2 newspaper articles a week, besides reviewing a number of books. In addition, I have just finished a tale of my own." "What is it about?" "It tells how in a certain town the governor used to beat the citizens with his own hand." "The realistic tendency, right enough," commented Oblomov. "Quite so," said the delighted litterateur. "In my tale, which is novel and daring in its idea, a traveler witnesses a meeting of this kind, seeks an interview with the governor of the province, and lays before him a complaint. At once the said governor of the province orders an official who happens to be proceeding to that town for the purpose of conducting another investigation to inquire also into the truth of the complaint just laid, and likewise to collect evidence as to the character and behavior of the local administrator. The official in question calls together the local citizens on the pretext of a trade conference, and incidentally sounds them concerning the other matter. And what do you suppose they do? They merely smile, present their compliments, and load the governor of the town with praises. Thereafter the official makes extraneous inquiries, and is informed that the said citizens are rogues who trade in rotten merchandise, give underweight, cheat the treasury, and indulge in wholesale immorality, wherefore the beatings have been a just retribution. Then you intend the assaults committed by the governor to figure in the story as the fatum of the old tragedians?" "Quite so," said Penkin. "You have great quickness of apprehension, and ought yourself to tackle the writing of stories." "Yes, it has always been my idea to expose the arbitrariness of our local governors, the decline of morality among the masses, the faulty organization existing among our subordinate officials, and the necessity of drastic but legal measures to counterbalance these evils." "'Tis a novel idea for a story, is it not?" "Certainly, and to me who read so little a peculiarly novel one. True, I have never once seen you with a book in your hand. Nevertheless, I beseech you to read a poem which, I may say, is shortly to appear. It is called The Love of a Blackmailer for a Fallen Woman. The identity, the author, I am not at liberty to disclose, at all events yet. Pray give me an idea of this poem. It exposes, as you will see, the whole mechanism of the social movement, but a mechanism that is painted only in poetic colors. Each spring of that engine is touched upon, and each degree of the social scale held up to the light. We see summoned to the bar, as it were, a weak but vicious lord with a swarm of blackmailers who are engaged in cheating him. Also various categories of fallen women are dissected, French women, German women, and others, the whole being done with vivid and striking verisimilitude. Certain extracts from the poem have come to my ears, and I may say that the author is a great man. One hears in him the notes both of Dante and of Shakespeare." "And whence has he originated?" asked Oblomov, leaning forward in astonishment. But Penkin, perceiving that he had now said too much, merely repeated that Oblomov must read the poem and judge for himself. This Oblomov declined to do. "Why?" asked Penkin. "The thing will make a great stir and be much talked about." "Very well, let people talk. 'Tis all some folks have to do. 'Tis their métier." "Nevertheless, read it yourself for curiosity's sake." "What have I not seen in books?" commented the other. "Surely folk must write such things merely to amuse themselves." "Yes, even as I do." "At the same time, what truth, what verisimilitude do you not find in books? How powerfully some of them move one through the vivid portraiture which they contain. Whomsoever these authors take, a chinovnik, an officer, or a blackmailer, they paint them as living creatures." Government official. But what have those authors to worry about, seeing that if, as you say, one chooses to take a given model for amusement's sake, the picture is sure to succeed? Yet no, real life is not to be described like that. In a system of that kind there is no understanding or sympathy, nor a particle of what we call humanity. 'Tis all self-conceit, no more. Folk describe thieves and fallen women as though they were apprehending them in the streets and taking them to prison. Never in the tales of such writers is the note of hidden tears to be detected, only that of gross, manifest malice and love of ridicule. And what more would you have? You yourself have said, and very aptly so, that seething venom, a taste for bilious incitement to vice, and a sneering contempt for the fallen are the only ingredients needed. "No, not the only ones," said Oblomov, firing up. "Picture a thief or a fallen woman or a cheated fool, if you like, but do not forget the rest of mankind. What about humanity, pray?" "Writers like yourself try to write only with the head." "What? Do you suppose the intellect can work separately from the heart? Why, the intellect needs love to fertilize it. Rather, stretch out your hand to the fallen and raise him, weep over him if he is lost beyond recall, but in no case make sport of him, for he is one to whom there should be extended only compassion. See in him yourself, and act accordingly. That done, I will read you and bow my head before you. But in the writings of the school of which I have spoken, what art, what poetical coloring are you able to discover? Should you elect to paint debauchery in the mire, at least do so without making any claim to poetry." "What?" "You bid me depict nature, roses, nightingales, a winter's morning, and all that sort of thing, when things like these are seething and whirling around us? Nay, we need rather the bare physiology of society. No longer are love songs required." "Give me man, and man alone," said Oblomov. "And having given me him, do you try to love him." "What? To love the usurer, the hypocrite, the peculating and stupid official? Why should I do that?" "'Tis evident you have had little experience of literature. Such fellows want punishing, want turning out of the civic circle and the community." "Out of the civic circle and the community, you say?" ejaculated Oblomov with a gasp as he rose and stood before Penkin. "That is tantamount to saying that once in that faulty vessel there dwelt the supreme element, that, ruined though the man may be, he is still a human being, as even are you and I. Turn him out, indeed. How are you going to turn him out of the circle of humanity, out of the bosom of nature, out of the mercy of God?" Oblomov came near to shouting as he said this, and his eyes were blazing. "How excited you have grown!" said Penkin in astonishment, whereupon even Oblomov realized that he had gone too far. He pulled himself up, yawned slightly, and stretched himself out sluggishly upon the sofa. For a while silence reigned. "What kind of books do you mostly read?" inquired Penkin. "Books of travel," replied Oblomov. Again there was a silence. "And will you read the poem when it has come out?" continued Penkin. "If so, I will bring you a copy of it." Oblomov shook his head. "Nor my story?" Oblomov signified assent. "Very well, then. Now I must be off to press," continued Penkin. "Do you know why I came to see you today? I came because I wanted to propose to you a visit to the Ekaterinhof. I have a conveyance of my own, and inasmuch as, tomorrow, I must write an article on current events, I thought we might jointly look over my notes on the subject, and you might advise me as to any point omitted. We should enjoy the expedition, I think. Let us go." "No, I am not well," said Oblomov with a frown, covering himself with the bedclothes. "But you might come and lunch with me today, and then talk. I have just experienced a couple of misfortunes." "Ah, the whole of our staff is to lunch at St. George's, I fear, and then to go on to the festival. Also, at night I have my article to write, and the printer must receive the manuscript by daylight at the latest. Goodbye!" A smart restaurant in Petrograd. "At night I have my article to write," mused Oblomov after his friend's departure. "Then when does he sleep? However, he is making some 5,000 rubles a year, so his work is so much bread and butter to him. Yet to think of being continually engaged in writing, in wasting one's intellect upon trifles, in changing one's opinions, in offering one's brain and one's imagination for sale, in doing violence to one's own nature, in giving way to ebullitions of enthusiasm, and the whole without a single moment's rest or the calling of a single halt. Yes, to think of being forced to go on writing, like the wheel of a machine, writing tomorrow, writing the day after, writing though the summer is approaching and holidays keep passing one by. Does he never stop to draw breath, the poor wretch?" Oblomov glanced at the table where everything lay undisturbed, and the ink had become dried up, and not a pen was to be seen, and as he looked he rejoiced to think that he was lying there as careless as a newborn baby, not worrying at all, nor seeking to offer anything for sale. But what of the starosta's letter and the notice to quit? Yes, suddenly he had remembered these things, and once more he became absorbed in thought. Again the doorbell rang. "Why is everyone seeking me out today?" he wondered as he waited to see who next should enter. This time the newcomer proved to be a man of uncertain age, of the age when it is difficult to guess the exact number of years. Also, he was neither handsome nor ugly, neither tall nor short, neither fair nor dark. In short, he was a man whom nature had dowered with no sharp-cut distinguishing features, whether good or bad, mental or physical. "Ha!" said Oblomov as he greeted him. "So it is you, Alexiev. When saw you come? To tell the truth. To tell the truth." "I had not thought to call upon you today," replied the visitor, "but by chance I met Ovchinin, and he carried me off to his quarters, whither I, in my turn, have now come to convey you." "To convey me to Ovchinin's. Already Alyanov, Pshailo, and Kolniagin are there. But why have they collected together? And what do they want with me? Ovchinin desires you to lunch with him and then to accompany him and the rest of us to the Ekaterinhof. Likewise, he has instructed me to warn you to hire a conveyance. Come, get up. 'Tis fully time you were dressed." "How am I to dress? I have not yet washed myself." "Then do so at once." With that, Alexiev fell to pacing the room. Presently he halted before a picture which he had seen 1,000 times before. Then he glanced once or twice out of the window, took from a whatnot an article of some sort, turned it over in his hands, looked at it from every point of view, and replaced the same. That done, he resumed his pacing and whistling, the whole being designed to avoid hindering Oblomov from rising and performing his ablutions. 10 minutes passed. "What is the matter with you?" asked Alexiev suddenly. "What is the matter with me? I mean, Why are you still in bed? I cannot tell you. Is it really necessary that I should get up? Of course it is necessary, for they are waiting for us. Besides, you said that you would like to go. To go where? I have no such desire. Only this moment you said we would go and lunch at Ovchinin's and then proceed to the Ekatenhof. No, I cannot. It would mean my going out into the damp. Besides, rain is coming on. The courtyard looks quite dark. As a matter of fact, not a single cloud is in the sky, and the courtyard looks dark only because you never have your windows washed. Well, well, said Oblomov. By the way, have I yet told you of my misfortunes, of the letter from my starosta, and of the notice given me to quit this flat? No, answered Alexiev. What about the letter? The document not being immediately forthcoming, Zakhar was summoned to search for it, and after it had been discovered beneath the counterpane, Oblomov read it to his friend. Though passing over certain greetings, added to inquiries as to the recipient's health. The gist of the epistle was that the bulk of the crops on Oblomov's estate were likely to fail for want of rain. Never mind, said Alexiev. One must never give way to despair. And what would you do in my place? I should first of all consider matters. Never ought one to come to a hasty decision. Crumpling the letter in his hands, Oblomov leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and remained in that posture for a considerable time. His brain flooded with disturbing reflections. I wish Stolz would come, at length he remarked. He has written that he is about to do so, but God knows what has happened to him. He could solve the situation. Suddenly the doorbell rang with such vehemence that both men started, and Zakhar came hurrying out of his pantry. 3. The next moment there entered the room a tall, loosely built man who evidently did not believe in refinement of costume, nor was in any way ashamed of the fact. This was Mikhail Andreevich Tarantiev, a native of the same district as Oblomov. Though an individual of rough, sullen mien, and of rather an overbearing manner, he did not lack a certain keen ruggedness of wit, nor could anyone be a better judge of mundane questions in general, nor a better resolver of tangled juridical problems. Though usually he behaved rudely to the person who had sought his advice on these matters. Nevertheless, his abilities stopped short at a talent for verbal exposition, and no sooner was he called upon to transmit a theory into action than his whole bearing underwent a change, and in every case he discovered practical difficulties in the way of what he conceived to be the best course to take. "How are you?" he said brusquely as he extended a hairy hand. "What do you mean by lying in bed like a log? Presently it will be 12 o'clock, yet you are sprawling about on your back." The other forestalled him by hurriedly slipping his feet into his slippers, or the newcomer would have pulled him out of bed. "I was just about to rise," said Oblomov with a yawn. "Yes, I know how you rise, how you go rolling about until lunchtime. Zakhar, come and help your master to dress." Zakhar entered and glared at Tarantiev. Raising himself on his elbow, Oblomov stepped from the bed like a man who is thoroughly worn out and, dropping into an armchair, sat there without moving. Meanwhile, Zakhar pomaded, parted, and combed his master's hair, and then asked him if he desired to wash. "Presently," said Oblomov. "Do you wait a little?" "Ah, so you are here," said Tarantiev suddenly as he turned to Alexiev. "I had not seen you. By the way, what a swine is that kinsman of yours?" "What kinsman?" inquired Alexiev with a stare. "I do not possess a single relative." "I mean Afanasyev. Surely he is a relative of yours?" "I know he is." "My name is Alexiev, not Afanasyev," said the other. "And I repeat that I do not possess a single relative. But he is just like you. An ugly man, as well as, like yourself, again, a man of the name of Vasily Nikolaich. Nevertheless, he is no kinsman of mine. Besides, my first names are Ivan and Alexeyich. Well, he is exactly like you, and a swine besides." You can tell him that when next you meet him. I neither possess his acquaintance nor have ever set eyes upon him, said Alexiev, opening his snuff-box. Give me a pinch, put in Terentiev. You use the plain stuff and not the French, do you? Why not use the French? Never have I seen a swine like that relative of yours. On one occasion I borrowed of him 50 rubles. That was 2 years ago, and 50 rubles are not a very large sum, are they? They are a sum which he might well have forgotten, mightn't he? Yes, he very well might, but as a matter of fact he remembered it. Not a month had passed before he took to saying whenever he met me, "How about that debt?" I assure you I found him a perfect nuisance. And only yesterday he walked into our office and said to me, "I expect you have just received your salary and are therefore in a position to repay me." Well, I handed him over my salary, even though he had come there for the express purpose of shaming me in public. I had much ado not to put him out of the door. Poor fellow, you need the money, I suppose. As though I had not needed it. Am I such a rich man that I should quietly let him pouch 50 rubles? Oblomov, hand me a cigar. The cigars are in that box there, said Oblomov, pointing to a whatnot. He was still posed in his usual lazy but becoming attitude. He was still taking no notice whatever of what was being done or said around him, but contemplating his small white hands. "What a rubbishy weed," Terentiev remarked after sending out a puff of tobacco smoke and inhaling another. "You have come too early in the morning," suggested Oblomov with a yawn. "Then I am boring you, am I?" "No, I was merely making a remark. Usually you arrive at lunchtime, but today you have come an hour beforehand." "I have come an hour beforehand because I wish to find out what there is likely to be to eat at dinner. As a rule, you provide such rubbishy stuff. You had better go into the kitchen and inquire." Taramiev departed for the purpose. "We are to have beef and veal," he remarked on returning. "Ah, friend Oblomov, though a landowner, you haven't the smallest notion how to live. Your menage is the menage of a tradesman. Have you bought that Madeira yet?" "I don't know," replied Oblomov, scarcely noticing what had been said. "You had better inquire of Zakhar. At all events, there will be some sort of wine." "What?" "The rubbishy old stuff which you bought of a German dealer. You ought to go to the English store for your wines." "Very well. Please send to the store for some." "Money first, please." Oblomov fumbled in a cash-box and produced therefrom a 10-ruble note. "Madeira costs 7 rubles the bottle," he said. "Here are 10 rubles. You will be given change at the store." Terentiev hastened to cram the note into his pocket. "Likewise, do you feel like hiring a conveyance and going to the Ekaterinhof today?" he inquired. "If so, you might take me with you." Oblomov shook his head. "I have met with 2 misfortunes," he remarked. "In the first place, I am to be turned out of this fiat. Because you haven't paid your rent, I suppose. No, that is not the reason. I always pay in advance. Tell me what had better be done." "Who made me your adviser? Do you think I give advice for nothing?" "Ask him, rather." And Terentiev pointed to Alexiev, "or else that kinsman of his." "No, no. Tell me what I ought to do." "I should advise you to move to another flat." "I could have said that myself." "To the flat of a friend of mine in the Viborg quarter," continued Terentiev. "What? To a flat in the Viborg quarter? In winter the whole district is overrun with wolves. The Viborg quarter is one of the most outlying suburbs of Petrograd. True, at times they come there from the Neva Islands, but my friend's house has high walls to it, and, in addition, she and her family and a bachelor brother are nice people, and not like that fellow over there." He pointed to Alexiev. "But what has all this to do with me?" said Oblomov irritably. "I tell you I am not going to move there." "You fool!" exclaimed Terentiev. "In that house you would be much quieter and more comfortable than you are here, and you would pay less, and you would have larger quarters. Besides, it is a more respectable place than this. Here one has to sit at a dirty table on which the pepper pot is empty, the vinegar bottle the same, the knives are not clean, the tablecloth is falling to pieces, and dust lies everywhere. Give me my cab fare, and I will go and secure you the flat at once. Then you can move into it tomorrow." Terentiev started to leave the room. "Stop, stop!" cried Oblomov. "I tell you I am not going to the Viborg quarter. Pray exercise your wits in contriving how I may remain where I am. Moreover, I have a still more important affair on hand. That is to say, I have just received from my starosta a letter concerning which I should be glad of your advice." With that he searched for the document, found it after some difficulty, and read it aloud. "So you hear what the starosta says as to drought and a failure of the crops. What ought I to do?" "The prime necessity," replied Terentiev, "is complete quiet for you, that you would get at the house of the friend of whom I have just spoken, and I could come to see you every day." Yes, said Oblomov. "But what about this affair of the starosta?" "The starosta is lying. He is a thief and a rogue. Why, I know an estate only 50 versts from yours, where the harvest of last year was so good that it cleared the owner completely of debt. That being so, why have the crops on your estate threatened to fail? Clearly the starosta is a robber. If I were there, I'd teach him. Do you suppose this letter to be a natural and honest one? No more than we can suppose that sheep's head over there," he pointed to Alexiev again, "is capable of writing an honest letter, or his kinsman either." "Whom am I to appoint in the starosta's place?" asked Oblomov. "Another man might prove even worse than he. You yourself had better go to the estate and stay there for the summer, and then move into my friend's house. I will see that her rooms shall be ready for you. Yes, I will see to it at once. Personally, I should have sold that property of yours and bought another. Hand it over to me, and I will very soon make the folk there aware that I am alive." The upshot of it was that Oblomov accorded a half-hearted consent to Terentiev's procuring him a new lodging, and also to his writing to the governor of the district where his Oblomov's property was situated. After that, Terentiev departed, stating that he would return to dinner at 5 o'clock. With Terentiev's departure, a calm of 10 minutes reigned in the apartment. Oblomov was feeling greatly upset, both by the starosta's letter and by the prospect of the impending removal. Also, the tumultuous Terentiev had thoroughly tired him out. "Why do you not sit down and write the letter?" asked Alexiev. "If you wish, I will clean the inkstand for you." "Clean it, and the Lord bless you," sighed Oblomov. "Let me write the letter alone, and then you shall fair copy it after dinner." "Very well," replied Alexiev. "But now I must be off, or I shall be delaying the Ekaterinhof party." "Goodbye." Oblomov did not heed him, but, sinking back into a recumbent position in the armchair, relapsed into a state of meditative lethargy. 4. Zakhar, after closing the door successively behind Terentiev and Alexiev, stood expecting to receive a summons from his master, inasmuch as he had overheard the fact that the latter had undertaken to write a letter. But in Oblomov's study all remained silent as the tomb. Zakhar peeped through the chink of the door, and perceived that his master was lying prone on the sofa, with his head resting on the palm of his hand. The valet entered the room. "Why have you lain down again?" he asked. "Do not disturb me. Cannot you see that I am reading?" was Oblomov's abrupt reply. "Nay, but you ought to wash, and then to write that letter," urged Zakhar, determined not to be shaken on. "Yes, I suppose I ought. I will do so presently. Just now I am engaged in thought." As a matter of fact, he did read a page of the book which was lying open, a page which had turned yellow with a month's exposure. That done, he laid it down and yawned. "How it all wearies me," he whispered, stretching and then drawing up his legs. Glancing at the ceiling as once more he relapsed into a voluptuous state of coma, he said to himself with momentary sternness, "No, business first." Then he rolled over and clasped his hands behind his head. As he lay there, he thought of his plans for improving his property. Swiftly he passed in review certain grave and fundamental schemes affecting his ploughland and its taxation, after which he elaborated a new and stricter course to be taken against laziness and vagrancy on the part of the peasantry, and then passed to sundry ideas for ordering his own life in the country. He lingered over a probable disposition of the rooms, and fixed in his mind the dimensions of the dining room and the billiard room, and determined which way the windows of his study must face. Indeed, he even gave a thought to the furniture and to the carpets. Next, he designed a wing for the building, calculated the number of guests whom that wing would accommodate, and set aside proper sites for the stables, the coach-houses, and the servants' quarters. Finally, he turned his attention to the garden. The old lime and oak trees should all be left as they were, but the apple trees and pear trees should be done away with, and succeeded by acacias. Also, he gave a moment's consideration to the idea of a park, but, after calculating the cost of its upkeep, came to the conclusion that such a luxury would prove too expensive, wherefore he passed to the designing of orangeries and aviaries. So vividly did these attractive visions of the future development of his estate flit before his eyes, that he came to fancy himself already settled there and engaged in witnessing the result of several years' working of his schemes. On a fair summer's evening he seemed to be sitting at a tea-table on the terrace of Oblomovka, sitting under a canopy of leafy shade which the sun was powerless to penetrate. From a long pipe in his hand he was lazily inhaling smoke and reveling both in the delightful view which stretched beyond the circle of the trees and in the coolness and the quiet of his surroundings. In the distance some fields were turning to gold as the sun, setting behind a familiar birch grove, tinged to red the mirror-like surface of the lake. From the fields a mist had risen, for the chill of evening was falling and dusk approaching apace. To his ears, at intervals, came the clatter of peasantry as they returned homewards, and at the entrance gates the servants of the establishment were sitting at ease, while from their vicinity came the sound of echoing voices and laughter, the playing of balalaiki, and the chattering of girls as they pursued the sport of gorikleki. Around him also his little ones were frisking at times, climbing onto his knee and hanging about his neck, while behind the samovar was seated the real ruler of all that his eyes were beholding, his divinity, a woman, his wife. And in the dining room, a room at once elegant and simply appointed, a cheerful fire was glowing, and Zacher, now promoted to the dignity of a major domo and adorned with whiskers turned wholly gray, was laying a large round table to a pleasant accompanying tinkle of crystal and silver as he arranged, here a decanter and there a fork. 3-stringed lute-like instruments, a sort of catch as catch can, tea, urn. Presently the dreamer saw his wife and himself sit down to a bountiful supper. Yes, and with them was Stolz, the comrade of his youth, his unchanging friend, with other well-known faces. Lastly, he could see the inmates of the house retiring to rest. Oblomov's features blushed with delight at the vision. So clear, so vivid, so poetical was it all, that for a moment he lay with his face buried in the sofa cushions. Suddenly there had come upon him a dim longing for love and quiet happiness. Suddenly he had become athirst for the fields and the hills of his native place, for his home, for a wife, for children. After lying face downwards for a moment or two, he turned upon his back. His features were alight with generous emotion, and for the time being he was happy. Again the charming seductiveness of sleep, waking, enfolded him in its embrace. He pictured to himself a small colony of friends who should come and settle in the villages and farms within a radius of 15 or 20 versts of his country house. Every day they should visit one another's houses, whether to dine or to sup or to dance, until everywhere around him he would be able to see only bright faces framed in sunny days. faces which should be ever free of care and wrinkles, and round and merry and ruddy and double-chinned and of unfailing appetite. In all his neighborhood there should be constant summertide, constant gaiety, unfailing good fare, the joys of perennial lassitude. My God, he cried in the fullness of his delight, and with that he awoke. Once more to his ears came the cries of hawkers in the courtyard as they vended coal, sand, and potatoes. Once more he could hear someone begging for subscriptions to build a church. Once more from a neighboring building which was in course of erection there streamed a babel of workmen's shouts mingled with the clatter of tools. Ah, he sighed with a sense of pain. Such is real life, what ugliness there is in the roar of the capital. When shall I attain the life of paradise, the life for which I yearn? Shall I ever see my own fields, my own forests? Would that at this moment I were lying on the grass under a tree and gazing upwards at the sun through the boughs and trying to count the birds which come and go over my head. But what about the plans for improving the estate? And what about the starosta and the flat? Once again these things knocked at his memory. Yes, he answered them. Seichas. Presently. With that he rose to a sitting posture on the sofa, lowered his legs to the level of his slippers, and slipped the latter onto his feet, after which he sat still for a little while. At length he attained a wholly erect posture, and remained meditating for a couple of minutes. "Zakhar! Zakhar!" he shouted as he eyed the table and the inkstand. "I want you to... Further he failed to get, but mutely pointed to the inkstand, and then relapsed into thought. The doorbell rang, and a little man with a bald head entered. "Hello, doctor!" Oblomov exclaimed as he extended one hand towards his guest, and with the other one drew forward a chair. "What chance brings you here?" "The chance that, since all of you decline to be ill and never send for me, I am forced to come of myself," replied the doctor jestingly. "But no," he added in a more serious tone. "The truth is, I had to visit a neighbor of yours on the upper floor, and thought I might as well take you on the way. How are you?" Oblomov shook his head despondently. "Poorly, doctor," he said. "I have just been thinking of consulting you. My stomach will scarcely digest anything. There is a pain in the pit of it, and my breath comes with difficulty." "Give me your wrist," said the doctor. He closed his eyes and felt the patient's pulse. "And have you a cough?" he inquired. "Yes, at night time, but more especially while I am at supper." "And does your heart throb at all, or your head ache?" He then added other questions, bowed his bald pate, and subsided into profound meditation. At length he straightened himself with a jerk and said with an air of decision, 2 or 3 years more of this room, of lying about, of eating rich, heavy foods, and you will have a stroke." Oblomov started. "Then what ought I to do, doctor? Tell me, for heaven's sake. Merely what other people do, namely, go abroad." "Pardon me, doctor, but how am I to do that? Why should you not?" "Does money prevent you, or what?" Yes, money is the reason," replied Oblomov, gladly catching at the excuse, which was the most natural one that could possibly have been devised. "See here, just read what my starosta writes." "Quite so, but that is no business of mine," said the doctor. "My business is to inform you that you must change your mode of life, and also your place of residence. You must have fresh air. You must have something to do. Go to Kissingen or to Ems and remain there during June and July, whilst you drink the waters. Then go on to Switzerland or to the Tyrol and partake of the local grape cure. That you can do during September and October." "Oh, the devil take the Tyrol," murmured Oblomov under his breath. "Next, transfer yourself to some dry place like Egypt, and put away from you all cares and worries." "Excellent," said Oblomov. "I only wish that starostas' letters like this one reached you. Also, you must do no thinking whatsoever." "No thinking, you say?" "Yes. You must impose upon the brain no exertion. But what about my plans for my estate? I am not a log, if you will pardon my saying so. Oh, very well. I have merely been warning you. Likewise, you must avoid emotion of every kind, for that sort of thing is sure to militate against a successful cure. Try rather to divert yourself with riding, with dancing, with moderate exercise in the open air, and with pleasant conversation, more especially conversation with the opposite sex. These things are designed to make your heart beat more lightly, and to experience none but agreeable emotions. Again, you must lay aside all reading and writing. Rent a villa which faces south and lies embowered in flowers, and surround yourself also with an atmosphere of music and women. And may I eat at all? Yes, certainly, but avoid all animal and farinaceous food, as well as anything which may be served cold. Eat only light soups and vegetables. Even in this great care will need to be exercise, for cholera, I may tell you, is about. Walk 8 hours out of every 24. Go in for shooting. Good Lord, groaned Oblomov. Finally, concluded the doctor, go to Paris for the winter, where, surrounded by a whirlpool of gaiety, you will best be able to distract your mind from your habitual brooding. Cultivate theaters, balls, masquerades, the streets, society friends, noise and laughter. Anything else? Inquired Oblomov, with ill-concealed impatience. The doctor reflected a moment. Yes, also get the benefit of sea air, he said. Cross over to England, or else go for a voyage to America. With chat he rose to take his leave. Should you carry out these instructions to the letter? He began. Yes, yes, of course I shall carry them out, said Oblomov bitterly as he accompanied the physician to the door. The doctor having departed, Oblomov threw himself back into an armchair, clasped his hands behind his head, and remained sitting in an almost unthinking heap. Roused by Zakhar to consider once more the question of changing his quarters, he engaged in a long and heated conversation with the valet. Eventually he dismissed the man to his den, but could not dismiss from his own mind certain comparisons which Zakhar had drawn between his master's life and the life of ordinary people. How strange that suddenly there should have dawned in him thoughts concerning human fate and destiny. All at once he found his mind drawing a parallel between that destiny and his own existence. All at once questions of life arose before his vision, like owls in an ancient ruin flushed from sleep by a stray ray of sunlight. Somehow he felt pained and grieved at his arrested development, at the check which had taken place in his moral growth, at the weight which appeared to be pressing upon his every faculty. Also gnawing at his heart there was a sense of envy that others should be living a life so full and free, while all the time the narrow, pitiful little pathway of his own existence was being blocked by a great boulder. And in his hesitating soul there arose a torturing consciousness that many sides of his nature had never yet been stirred, that others had never even been touched, and that not one of them had attained complete formation. Yet with this there went an aching suspicion that, buried in his being as in a tomb, there still remained a moribund element of sweetness and light, and that it was an element which, though hidden in his personality as a nugget lies lurking in the bowels of the earth, might once have become minted into sterling coin. But the treasure was now overlaid with rubbish, was now thickly littered over with dust. 'Twas as though someone had stolen from him and besmirched the store of gifts with which life and the world had dowered him, so that always he would be prevented from entering life's field and sailing across it with the aid of intellect and of will. Yes, at the very start a secret enemy had laid a heavy hand upon him and diverted him from the road of human destiny. And now he seemed to be powerless to leave the swamps and wilds in favor of that road. All around him was a forest, and ever the recesses ox his soul were growing dimmer and darker, and the path more and more tangled, while the consciousness of his condition kept awaking within him less and less frequently, to arouse only for a fleeting moment his slumbering faculties. Brain and volition alike had become paralyzed, and, to all appearances, irrevocably. The events of his life had become whittled down to microscopical proportions. Yet even with them he was powerless to cope. He was powerless to pass from one of them to another. Consequently, they bandied him to and fro like the waves of the ocean. Never was he able to oppose to any event elasticity of will. Never was he able to conceive, as the result of any event, a reasoned-out impulse. Yet to confess this, even to himself, always cost him a bitter pang. His fruitless regrets for lost opportunities, coupled with burning reproaches of conscience, always pricked him like needles and led him to strive to put away such reproaches and to discover a scapegoat. Once again Oblomov sank asleep, and as he slept he dreamed of a different period, of different people, of a different place from the present. Let us follow him thither. We find ourselves transported to a land where neither sea nor mountains nor crags nor precipices nor lonely forests exist, where, in short, there exists nothing grand or wild or immense. Of what advantage, indeed, is the grand, the immense? The ocean depresses the soul of man, and at the sight of its boundless expanse of billows, an expanse whereon the weary eye is allowed no resting place from the uniformity of the picture, the heart of man grows troubled within him, and he derives no solace from the roaring and mad rolling of the waves. Ever since the world began, those waves have sung the same dim, enigmatical song. Ever since the world began, they have voiced but the querulous lament of a monster which, everlastingly doomed to torment, utters a chorus of shrill, malicious cries. On the shores of the sea no bird warbles, only the silent gulls like lost spirits flit wearily along its margin or circle over its surface. In the presence of that turmoil of nature, the roar even of the wildest beast sounds weak, and the voice of man becomes wholly overwhelmed. Yes, beside it man's form looks so small and fragile that it is swallowed up amid the myriad details of the gigantic picture. That alone may be why contemplation of the ocean depresses man's soul. During periods also of calm and immobility, his spirit derives no comfort from the spectacle, for in the scarcely perceptible oscillation of the watery mass he sees ever the slumbering, incomprehensible force, which, until recently, has been mocking his proud will and, as it were, submerging his boldest schemes, his most dearly cherished labors and endeavors. In the same way, mountains and gorges were not created to afford man encouragement, inasmuch as, with their terrible, menacing aspect, they seemed to him the fangs and talons of some gigantic wild beast, of a beast which is reaching forth in an effort to devour him. Too vividly they remind him of his own frail build, too painfully they cause him to go in fear for his life. And over the summits of those crags and precipices the heavens look so remote and unattainable that they seem to have become removed out of the ken of humanity. Not so that peaceful corner of the earth upon which our hero in his slumber opened his eyes. There, on the contrary, the heavens seem to hug the earth, not in order that they might the better aim their thunderbolts, but in order that they might the closer enfold it in a loving embrace. In fact, they hovered low in order that, like a sheltering paternal roof, they might guard this chosen corner of the earth from every adversity. Meanwhile the sun shone warm and bright during half the year, and, withdrawing, did so slowly and reluctantly that it seemed ever to be turning back for one more look at the beloved spot, as though wishing to give it one more bright, warm day before the approaching weather of autumn. Also, the hills of that spot were no more than reduced models of the terrible mountains which, in other localities, rear themselves to affright the imagination. Rather, they resembled the gentle slopes down which one may roll in sport, or where one may sit and gaze dreamily at the declining sun. Below them, toying and frisking, ran a stream. In one place it discharged itself into a broad pool. In another it hurried along in a narrow thread. In a third it slackened its pace to a sudden mood of reverie, and, barely gliding over the stones, threw out on either side small rivulets whereof the gentle burbling seemed to invite sleep. Everywhere the vicinity of this corner of the earth presented a series of landscape studies and cheerful, smiling vistas. The sandy, shelving bank of the stream, a small copse which descended from the summit of that bank to the water, a winding ravine of which the depths were penetrated by a rill, a plantation of birch trees, all these things seemed purposely to be fitted into one another and to have been drawn by the hand of a master. Both the troubled heart and the heart which has never known care might have yearned to hide themselves in this forgotten corner of the world, and to live its life of ineffable happiness.